So pick back up where you were talking about asking for and not receiving chain of custody documents.
Okay, well, that, since we asked and did not receive any of it, that to me is just one reason. Well, how can I trust, as a board member to certify this election when I cannot receive even a sampling, anything at all with regards to chain of custody documents? So that was just another one of the things in my mind leading up to certification that was something that certainly was not fulfilled. There was also for that election the advent of this whole Dropbox circumstance was unveiled, and then we had I think Fulton County, we had like 36 or so drop boxes located around the county. And these drop boxes at that particular point were set outside of an early voting location, which means that they're in the elements. They're 24 hours a day, but there were surveillance cameras as required that supposedly were operating 24/7 so that they could be monitored, and anybody tried to do any damage or anything nefarious to any of those locations, that could be looked at, and hopefully somebody sent out there to secure the situation. But we'd ask for not every surveillance tape, but ask for to see surveillance tapes on a basically whatever, just give us some samplings of that so we can take a look at it, because I knew that this was going to be an important issue because of all the hullabaloo that any of us that were alive in those days, was witnessing as being an issue.
You can't trust him, and you'd be an absolute fool to trust it. And the fact that you have any board member at all, regardless of party, that would trust anything that a government did in a highly contested election just based on trust of government is insane to me, man. I mean, even if you believe the result is pure, why would you not make sure that you had every T crossed and every I dotted? Because you know that there's going to be questions, like real questions. So, but they didn't do that. I mean, here's what we have so far. We've got more people registered than even live in the county. And we've got ballots come into the system that no one can prove where they came from or when they got there. But again, luckily, voter fraud just doesn't happen. Never has, never will.
And from that request, again, to just, the way in which it turned out, there was never one surveillance tape, an inch of footage that was ever delivered to the board. And if it was delivered to anybody, it certainly was not any board member that I was aware of or made me aware of. So that was what was another issue. The other issue we had down here was this whole questioning of ballots underneath a table and then being pulled out on election night, excuse me, at State Farm Arena. Well, we did see on television, by the way, we did see that surveillance tape. And of course, I, as a board member and knowing most all of those people who were in that room that night, I didn't make any judgment as to what was going on. I had no basis to do that. But I did see it. And of course, I asked the questions of our director. And this was, I believe, the day following Election Day. And, his response was, well, he just hasn't had time to look into this, but he will and get back to us. Well, there was nothing ever gotten back to, at least to me as a board member, that had any explanation of that election night at State Farm Arena. And we got to certification, and there was still no response to that. Did not know, still being investigated exactly. Well, I think the director, in my opinion, and still believe that to this day, could have, stated, look, I've talked to everybody and this is what transpired. I firmly believe that should have been done by the then director.
Okay, so This is not looking good. It turns out when Trump made the phone call claiming that it all looked like something pretty sneaky may have actually happened in Georgia, turns out maybe he's not so crazy. And maybe that phone call isn't so criminal, because this is what we now have so far. In the first 6 minutes of this guy's testimony, we've got more people registered than even exists in Fulton County. We've got ballots showing up without any chain of custody documents that prove where they came from, when they came, who had contact with them. Basically everything you'll ever need to know about the life of a ballot. And no one on the elections board, the people that have to make the decision as to whether or not the election was clean and lawful, has ever seen the footage of drop boxes that the ballots with the chain of custody issues allegedly came from. That does not sound like a perfect election to me.
But it was not. And the last thing was, well, not the last thing, but the big, what I call the 4 or 5 things that prevented me from certifying was we had such a huge number of absentee by mail ballots. And those ballots, we as the department and the board, and then the board of commissioners who has to approve, certain expenditures, because it was, becoming very clear that there was going to be a larger amount of absentee by mail ballots this election year than by far than in previous years. So they determined a system that is called Bluecrest. And the Bluecrest platform primarily was an absentee by mail or a paper ballot processing application. And that would, scan in the outer oath envelopes. It would open them. It would then pull them out. It would flatten them, as they call it, and then put them in bundles for, for later processing and scanning. Part of that, or one of the applications or elements of that Bluecrest platform, was an electronic signature verification component. And of course, we all, as that was reported, we all thought that was going to be up and running, and how, how exactly that the department, the people there for managing the absentee by mail ballot processing would have a very fine function in the electronic signature verification component. Well, as I recall, I believe that time frame was in October at the board meeting for October. I had asked the question, where are we with regards to the functionality of the electronic signature verification component? And I was told that the technicians from Bluecrest were in our building that day, and that they were working to functionalize the electronic signature verification component.
When you say functionality and functionalize, what's the plain English meaning of that?
Meaning getting it to work.
Thank you.
If that makes sense. Yeah, I'm sorry, I was unclear. That they were in there to make the thing work.
Okay.
And, we certainly, as we would let, the board meeting concluded, we went on, but after the fact, we were not told in between that October date and then, of course, about a month later, the election itself. At least I was not told that they did not get it to work. So, somewhere along the line, and I am sorry, I can't remember exactly when it was, but I had asked the question, well, okay, what did we do for signature verification? And the comment I got back was, which frankly at that time floored me, was, well, we didn't do any. And I remember I forget where I was, I was on a phone call, I forget exactly, and I apologize, it's been so long. But, I do remember that comment that, we didn't do any. Now, of course, I took that saying, all right, well, by law, you've got to do signature verification. You've got to at least have somebody looking at this. And one side of that is that whomever you have that is looking at is supposed to be, verifying signature. that if there is no signature on the oath envelope, then how are you curing it, or what are you doing with them? And I remember going down, on from that and said, well, there weren't many, so we just sent them back out, and if they reply on time, then they'll get their vote counted. Well, I thought that was a little weak, but anyway, that's as I recall, that's what I was told.